Hi, everyone. This is the final episode of the Language of Ahava podcast season. Thank you to all of our spectacular guests, to all of our listeners. It's been a fun year, and I have enjoyed every one of these conversations with Rabbi Steinhardt. I look forward to continuing this conversation in many new ways next year and in the months ahead. So please, everyone with young children who cares about Jewish family and Jewish community, message us and tell us what you'd like to hear and see more of, because we are here to carry on this conversation with you. But today our finale is We Are the Dads. And I couldn't be more excited to bring all the dads together. And these particular dads are my favorite dads because I know that they parent with thoughtfulness, with huge, open, loving hearts. And I know they deeply care about raising children who are equally thoughtful and loving. So bravo to these dads in particular and to all of our dad listeners. We were very excited to have you today, but let's check in with Rabbi Steinhardt. How's your week been, Rabbi?
It's been a good week. There's a lot of good stuff happening, and the synagogue is really becoming alive again in ways that we haven't seen it for a couple of years. So it's been great
to see everybody together, to celebrate with music, to celebrate.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that the next strain of the virus stays away for a while or doesn't affect us very seriously.
Yeah. Us too. We're putting up the shield. Yeah, we need at least some time to connect. So yeah, well, let me introduce our dads for you. We have Jamey Eisenberg, dad of 3 boys, and those boys range from preschool to school age. So he's got a big perspective on this because I know he was asking those dad questions when they were littler. And we also have Karl Kaufman, who is representing the only dad of a daughter on the podcast, but 2 family time age children. They haven't even started school yet. So there's a big parenting road ahead for him, I know. And if he gets to turn up, we will have Peter Berger here as well. So Jamey, I'm going to kick it off with you because you're the experienced young dad on this podcast. And so what I want to know is just a really open question on what's your dad life like? Like, how do you give that broad perspective of what it feels like to be a dad? Second part of the question is the Jewish part of the question. And that is, how much does being a Jewish family or a Jewish dad influence your day-to-day choices and values? Welcome, Jamey.
Thank you. Well, first off, the whole thing you said about, great dads. Carl, I'm sure qualifies. I'll move out of the way at some point when, I'll just be the stand-in for whoever the replacement is. But in regards to the first question, I think, you just kind of, at least my mindset is, you want to put your kids in the best position to succeed. And so, that's kind of what I try to think about with everything that they do. My kids are really involved in sports, obviously academics. They're Judaics, what they take part in, in terms of Hebrew school and religious school, at least the 2 older ones. Obviously Simon, my little guy is still at preschool at B'nai. And so, just trying to, make sure that, everything that I do for them or, hopefully they do for themselves, like you mentioned, having school age kids, homework is a challenge. Their schoolwork is a challenge. My oldest one, Ronan, is 9, he'll be 10 at the end of the month. Eli is 7, and then as you mentioned, Simon is 4. So for the 2 older ones, it's trying to keep them on track with what they do in their classroom and what they do with all of their various activities. And so again, I think just the mindset would be putting them in the best position to succeed, and how not just obviously me but my wife Allison, our goal is to put them in the best positions possible and help them as best we can. And then in terms of the second part of the question, I think it's not necessarily something that's discussed. It's more just, I think, the way that we try to live our lives. I think we've been blessed to be part of a good community. Certainly it comes a little bit more from my wife's side, as I'm sure Rabbi Steinhardt can attest, knowing my mother-in-law as well as he does with Lori Brenner and Allison, who he's watched since she was, in high school. They certainly provide a good base. My wife provides a good base, and I just try to follow her lead, to be honest. But I think it's just keeping, trying to keep our kids in the frame of mind of this is what we do in our house. This is how we try to respect other people, and it comes from I think a foundation of being attached to, such a great Jewish community that we have at B'nai Torah, and certainly with the leadership of Rabbi Steinhardt, Rabbi Englander, who we'll deeply miss, once he decides to leave, or when his last day is at the shul. But in any event, just using that foundation as a basis of kind of guiding who we are and who our kids hopefully become.
Yeah, what I hear from you, and I want to kick it back to Rabbi Steinhardt, because it's what I sort of imagined the struggle is when you're a dad of a young child. And Rabbi mentioned it before we started rolling, and that is when they're little and you want the best, you don't know how those dots are going to connect. So given that being the dad and the parent through uncertainty and hoping and doing your best, Rabbi, you can look back now at choices well made. And so please help us fix that circle.
I was kind of taken by Jamey's comment about doing your best to prepare your kids for success. And I think that we need to have clarity, and I think Jamey does, by the way, and I'm sure Karl does also, on what that means about success. So both you want them to engage in kind of the learning and the development of skills that will allow them to succeed. You want to help them with the interpersonal relationships and the challenges they have in the house with teachers, with their classmates, et cetera, that's part of it too. But then I think also, I always felt this with my kids when they got to a certain point, that their success will depend on a few things. One of the things I felt is they have to understand that they're going to have to work hard at whatever they choose to be or to do, and that I'm not going to push them on a particular path, but rather going to respect the path that they take. And the other thing is that they have to be comfortable within themselves, that you want them to have a sense of security, and you want them, and your kids aren't always happy, but you want them to be happy. And that sense of happiness or fulfillment comes from a sense of self, right? And so that as a parent, then it wasn't just that I tried to model hard work, but I didn't try to model vulnerability, for example, but I was honest with my kids. And so if things were hurting me, I would tell them without overdoing it and without being narcissistic about my own self and my own needs. But I wanted them to, their success would depend also on emotional development, emotional evolution. I can get to the religious stuff a little bit later, but I think that's really important, that they see their fathers as caring, loving, feeling human beings, that stuff doesn't just come from their moms, but that it also comes from, it can also be the sign of a very strong man.
Thank you. I agree. And I will tell you, being here at B'nai Torah for the last 19 years, what I know, if there was a stereotype to be made about Jewish dads, it is men with heart, and it is hands-on dads. And so I am here to say, I think it is part of the culture and the role modeling. But let's kick it over to Karl. And what's your dad life like, or anything you'd like to respond to that's been said? Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Excuse me. Dad life has been a challenge, obviously, in the age of COVID. Especially with two very young children, can't get vaccinated, and a lot of questions about socializing and what is the right thing to do. Should we take them out of this protective bubble that we've created for them? But it's also been very rewarding because I get to spend a lot of time with them, being home and seeing them grow up in these very precious early years. One thing I learned, or am still learning as a new father, relatively new father, is that you have to keep your ego checked a little bit, because with the kids, it's all about mama, 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 mama. And every now and then, the 12th thing out of their mouth might be a dada. And it's nice to hear that 12th dada, but it's not required. You have to know that a mother plays a very, very important role in a young child's life, and you have to step out of the way and be supportive as best you can, and know that those moms are working overtime to satisfy their children and their needs, and we have to kind of just step in when required.
James, does it change a little bit when they become a little bit older?
Oh no, they still want their mom. That's very much the case. I think the things that obviously evolve is the activities you do with them, and the involvement you have with as schoolwork becomes a focal point of their lives, and sort of how you become a helping hand, but I think I would assume just from the conversations like you mentioned, Karen, that we had before we started taping, and I would imagine Karl is part of a good partnership. I would like to think I'm part of a good partnership, and that's, I think that comes, so while they may want mommy a little bit more so, and that is a little bit of a blow to an ego sometimes, as they get older, I think they start to realize, and I think Rabbi Steinhardt indicated this earlier, that especially as you said, Karen, being part of the dads that you've seen, and I've certainly seen, in my years at B'nai Torah, and there is a lot of dads that are not just the stereotypical dads. There are a lot of dads. I remember you having a conversation with myself and Brian Draus about how dads have changed, and this was going back to when Ronan and Jackson were going through as early as family time, but certainly they were there for preschool, and you kind of made me realize that all the dads that I coach with, various sporting events with their kids, my kids and their friends, how just giving they are, and I think that's a testament to the program you've established, and the school there, and just how much it sort of brings dads into the fold, to give us an opportunity to show a different side of things than maybe again what the stereotypical father might be.
I mean, you guys have been hands-on, and I love your stories when Allison's traveling and you're doing the home juggle.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other part of the ego crushing is, we have this ideal of who we want to be in front of our children, and then it all falls apart on a regular basis. So, and Rabbi used that word, I'm going to be real and honest without being narcissistic. And so, being a parent really shatters our perfectionists or the idealism that we want to give to our kids. Rabbi?
No, go on. I don't have a comment here. I agree with what you guys are saying, and I really appreciate what you're saying also.
I think you are vulnerable and real and hands-on, and I think the real question. So the dad community, let's touch on that a little bit, because I think that we all understand that moms have a mom network, but I think you guys are connected in ways that past generations, Jamey, your friends at school age are your preschool family time friends in that parent, in some overlap. So how much support do you think you get from peers and from the communities in which you are parenting in?
I was thinking about this the other day, that I still obviously have a lot of friendships from growing up, college, work relationships, all those things. And I'm looking at my phone and like all the different text chains, and there's some connection in one way or another to B'nai Torah, from Ronan's group, from Eli's group, and just the sporting activities probably are the most prevalent in terms of how I'm connected with them. But I have I coach my kids in various sporting events, with Ronan, Matt Flax, who's got, I think it's 55 kids that have been through B'nai Torah. It's only 4, but it seems like they have many, many more. The Flax family, which is fantastic. Happy birthday, Matt, by the way. That he and I coach 2 different teams together because our kids are friends. Eli's group, Kevin Sobel, Eric Moskoff, Tom Ferraro, Peter Berger, who we spent a lot of time coaching soccer together. I have for those of you who don't know me, I deal with fantasy football, mostly for CBS Sports. I run various father-son fantasy football leagues that are not just exclusive to fathers or sons, but that's just kind of the way that it's fallen in, where it's almost exclusively, especially for Eli's group, all dads from, it's in some walk of some time frame, one or another, that their kids have been through B'nai Torah, whether it's family time or preschool or members of the shul. And so it just it's an inner working that has just grown, and I'm so thankful for. And it comes from, I think, like you referenced, it's not just like moms have their mom groups, and the stereotype of PTO moms and all those things, and certainly those are fantastic. But we've been lucky enough to establish a group of fathers, and I hope the same thing happens for you, Karl, where they've become what I hope is lifelong friends. And I look forward to our kids' activities, to play dates, to sporting events, because not just the opportunity to see my kids in those settings, but also to see those families. It's not just the fathers, it's the families. I think Rabbi Steinhardt, you probably aren't in the school part of it in the mornings. I walk through the school and I have 20 people say, "Hey, Coach Jamey, hey, Coach Jamey," and I have to look and see who it is, because and it's fascinating to me, and that's the other side of it, the ego boost. But you get that from all these kids that I've had the opportunity to be with, because of these families and the connections that I made in such a wonderful place.
I'd like to say something to that, which is an observation, having, been a rabbi. I've been a rabbi for like 39 years now. And that is when, at least in our movement, when we began to move from it being totally, male dominated in terms of all the ritual and the board of the synagogue, and then women began to participate much more fully, what I saw and what I was concerned about was that men were retracting, and that the community it was only women and mothers that were coming forward in terms of doing the work of the community and the ritual of the community, etc. And now I see it, it's balancing again. The pendulum is swinging, and so now I'm seeing both fathers and mothers, men and women, and I think that's really the healthy place to be. And I'm glad I'm seeing that, and I see these fathers who are really interested and involved in coming to the stuff.
Yeah, I think once you become hands-on and heart in, you can't do it alone. That loneliness, or that isolation, or that how do I respond to these cultural forces that sort of sometimes pick at my family, my child, or my well-being, gets compromised. And so we need each other so much. But Karl, as you said, you did this during COVID. So I didn't get to see you, and in your family choices, I didn't even get to see you in the outside family time classes. How did you offset that?
Yeah. As far as myself, I made sure to keep in touch with a lot of friends who also were just starting families of their own. That helped. We have friends here in Boca that we knew for years now, who are also young kids, same ages as ours. And my friends from high school also starting families at the same time. So whether it's group chats or group Zooms or just FaceTime, or just really making a concerted effort to do that.
Okay, wait. So what did you talk about? What were those chat questions that would percolate up for the dads?
Well, it was mostly about fantasy football, but but we would discuss our challenges, to the best of our ability as old friends, where we wouldn't get as much into the big emotional aspect of it, but we would say, so and so did this, so and so did that. A lot of camaraderie with the challenges we were facing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking because I'm the only female on this podcast. So, is it the dad fist bump, like we're going to talk about it, but not talk about it? Kind of was it that old, or how did you express vulnerability? Getting back to rabbis, and how did dads express vulnerability to each other, if they do?
Right. Well, I'm also lucky that I have my brother here as well in Florida, and I'm very close to my brother. He's not a father yet, but he kind of is getting a little crash course in what's going on. He's very hands-on with my kids. So I'm able to kind of commiserate with him, even though he's not exactly a father himself. But yeah, meeting up with friends in the area once a week or once a month, going out for a meal and kind of talking about the challenges and commiserating is very valuable. Some of us are more vulnerable than others. Some of us are willing to share more than others. I think men, as a generality, tend to be a little more tight-lipped about these things. But
just remember, moms are listening, so you can help them understand you.
I know. Well, I mean, a beer or two goes a long way.
Right.
I just heard the last Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, the Seinfeld series. And he was with a woman named, I think, Allie Wintwood. And she and her husband, who's George Stenophilus, they're good friends with the Seinfelds. And Jerry said, what do you talk about? He says to this woman, what do you talk about when you're with my wife or women? And she started to list some of those things. And then Jerry said, you want to know what men talk about when they're together? Nothing.
Pretty much.
And he said, men are afraid to talk about the stuff that's happening inside of them to other men. So
Jamey?
Yeah.
No, I think that's accurate. It's we tend to be a little closed off, which is probably problematic. I think Karl, like you said, with his brother, I think we all probably have somebody. It doesn't necessarily have to be male to male.
Right.
That you sort of confide in. That's probably not your spouse. But I do think that as you find whether it's a group of friends that you go out with or text with or Zoom with, whatever the case may be, that you probably find that there's a lot of commonalities, amongst, problems with your spouse, problems with your kids. Most of my conversations with my friends are about, my kids did this, my kids did that. How did you approach it if this happened? Whether it was school or sports or dealing with them just as individuals. I think those conversations tend to come up. You probably don't have necessarily as much of the emotional conversations, or you don't want to necessarily divulge if you're having problems with your spouse. That's just something I think a lot of us probably keep internal, not necessarily just to generalize it as men. Women probably a little bit more apt to speak about that. I don't want to speak for women because I don't know, but in any event, I think as fathers, those conversations tend to come up with my kid was doing this, and it could just be simple as something, like when Simon was potty training, or all of them were potty training, how did you handle that, aside from going to the guru of Karen, but how did you handle this situation? How do you handle that situation? My kid's in a slump in baseball. Do you have anybody you would recommend? It's those kind of conversations, where, especially if you know somebody who's been through it, I think Karl, your brother, if he has children, will probably appreciate the lessons you're teaching him. I know, going through, I'm lucky to have a wonderful brother-in-law in Kyle Whiting, who has an older son than my kids, and then has, two children that are the same age as my kids. And, some of the situations that he went through with Eitan, and just having those conversations, at times, so it's helpful to have people that have gone through it, and get their life experiences, because nothing is better than, I did this. Don't do this. I did this and this worked. And those are the things that I think you learn. And then you go through your own situations, and how did you learn with it? And how do you pass that on to somebody else that, may or may not pick your brain for it?
I love it. And I know you guys aren't talking the way we're talking, but I love the humor. I love the beers. And I am grateful that so many of you have shared incredible questions, vulnerabilities, and the insanity when you have shared with us in classes. So thank you for all that you do share with us. So I have another question, because again, I'm the outsider on this. So I'm trying to figure out, is there really a dad difference and a mom way? So my next questions, and Rabbi, you can come in wherever you want on this one, two sort of Jewish mom and general mom questions. And that is guilt and not feeling enough. As dads become more hands-on and involved, and you're there for the day-to-day parenting, do you have those same questions for yourself and feelings of guilt and not enoughness? Rabbi, do you want to say anything about that?
I'm not speaking from any place of expertise, nor am I speaking as a rabbi here. Just let me reflect a little bit on that. I think men are, generally speaking, are more risk-taking, and value independence more. And I think that's almost part of our nature. And so I think that our willingness to let our kids experiment, or let our kids, out in the world in a little different way. And I'm talking about even little kids in terms of risk behaviors. It could be climbing on a swing set or something like that. I think we have more tolerance for it than women do. And I also think, look, these guys both spoke about this attachment thing, mama, 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 10 times before dada. So early on, the men realized that that their kids aren't attached in the same way as they are to a mother, and they accept it. And the acceptance of that, I think, can help lead to greater independence than not only the rejection of that, but the need for it. Some mothers, as we know, need their kids to remain attached. And so there is something we can teach in that context.
And the research supports that, in the sense of, for the risk taking dads, and this is a struggle that I have for gender, is if you're going to take risks, you're going to learn how to make mistakes and grow from them. And so that mistake making alleviates the guilt of, oh, I should have done this, that second guessing, that perfectionism that we may teach boys, or that there might be a gender difference. It might be brain chemistry, so that in a testosterone way, but there does seem to be a continuum of risk and mistakes. Carl?
Go
ahead, Rabbi.
1 second, Carl. So you're seeing, a lot of helicopter moms, more so than helicopter dads, right? No?
I find that there's going to be one parent who leans one way or the other, and that we have and it could have to do with dads and daughters, might be more protective than dads and sons. There's a lot of, it gets complicated, but it's a continuum for both parents, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Carl?
Yeah. It's funny because are together, she's the one that's more protective, and I'm more, go off and run a little bit further ahead than she may be comfortable with. And I always tell her, I always quote a Tom Petty line, which is, "Most I worry about never happen anyways." When it's just me with the kids and I'm the one that's responsible for them, I find that I'm a lot more on top of them than if she weren't there, than if she was there. So as far as guilt, I think the biggest guilt I feel is for myself when I'm not paying enough attention to them, and I know I should be. So I might be, looking at something on my phone, and I realize, hey, there's this moment that I have with my children right now that I should be trying to be present and focused on them, as opposed to an email I get, or anything else. So that's the guilt I feel when I think of myself as a parent, is like, there's so many distractions in the world, and sometimes you just have to take a step back and say, what's really important is just right here, right in front of me.
Rabbi, I'm going to see if you have any last questions. My final wrap-up question, unless Rabbi has one, will be role models. Since we've got the sports world represented here, how do you make those choices of that role model for the kind of dad you want to be and for your children's values? And then we'll give Rabbi, any other questions you want to ask these amazing dads who I am loving this completely.
No, I don't have more questions for them, like for this context. I'm impressed with both you guys, Jamey and Karl, and this, both the seriousness and the sensitivity that you bring to it, and your willingness to find the joy in it. The role model question is a really, really good question. I was at the movies last Saturday night, and I saw the film Dune, and Dune is like, it's science fiction, and it's just filled with like apocalyptic scenes and lots of violence. And as you know, when you go to a film, the trailers you see before are all reflective of that same genre. So by the time the film started, I felt beat up. I felt like I was in a war zone. I had enough. I saw, and it's disturbing to me in terms of the exposure to violence that our kids have. I know there's a lot of violence in our world, but I don't think it means that we have to kind of reinforce it in that same way. I saw a film and I want to recommend it to you guys and to everybody. It's called Come On, Come On. Have you seen it? Anybody? Okay. It's the first film that I've seen in a long time, and it's with Joaquin Phoenix. It's the first film I've seen in a long time that truly gives voice to the child. And it's like it grows both out of a child's innocence and inquisitiveness and a child's needs, and a child's needs to also, not just in terms of where they're weak and have needs, but also to be able to put themselves out in the world in a strong way. And I highly, highly recommend everyone to see it. And when I saw it, I was like hopeful, maybe this will reflect some kind of a shift in our culture to begin to value different types of role models for people. So I highly recommend Come On, Come On, C''MON.
Thanks, Rabbi. Karl, the role models that you aspire to or for your children.
Yeah, I was very lucky to have many role models growing up, whether it was my dad, my grandfather, my uncle. I got to see a lot about what it means to be a father and a man, whether it was being charming and personable and flashing your smile when you needed to get something from my grandfather, or whether it was leading by quiet example from my father, or whether it was taking each day, living in the moment and just having a good time from my uncle. It was extremely valuable to me, and especially now. My dad passed away when Max was only 6 months old, and it was right before COVID. So, I didn't have him to lean on in terms of asking questions or really, saying, "Oh, how did you handle this situation?" or "How did you handle that situation?" But I know I've internalized all of that from having seen him as a dad for, as long as I had him.
Well, he's cheering you on. And great examples of strength and charm. Jamey?
I was a only child with a single mom, so I was lucky enough to have a wonderful grandfather in my life and two wonderful uncles. So from a male role model perspective, those are the three men I aspire to be, every day of my life. And I'm lucky to still have one of my uncles here to, give me a shining example. For my children, I have I think a unique perspective on this because, like you said, sports world. So I'm around a lot of athletes, or I've been around a lot of athletes, around a lot of NFL players. And I think my kids get a little bit of a healthy dose of, it's good to want to perform like these athletes. You don't necessarily have to be like these athletes. It would be nice to make money like these athletes, but you don't have to be necessarily the type of people that they are. Not that they're all bad and not that they're all good, but it's not necessarily like someone you see on TV. And I hope they sort of understand that you're watching something or someone do something for a living. That's not always necessarily who they are. To be honest, the role model that I would love my children to be, and this is coming from a father of three boys, is their mother, because she's the most amazing person that I've ever known. And I would say that if I was married to her, she's just she's a professional. She works more hours than she should. So they see how hard of a worker she is. She's loving, she's caring, she's firm, she's disciplinarian. So she knows when to put her foot down. She knows when to let them have fun. I don't think she's a helicopter mom, but she has that in her. And I grew up, like I said, with a single mom. So, I know that you can be raised and have a mother as a role model and, hopefully still be, what I would hope people would classify as still a manly person, if you want to put that stereotype on it. So the role model that I think, I'd love my children to aspire to be is their mother, their grandmother. So it's not necessarily man to man or, even to be like their father. If they have the traits of their mother, I think they would grow up to be, wonderful human beings and offer a lot to this world.
That's really beautiful, Jamey.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
perfect.
you brought a tear to my eye when you said it. Really,
I'm gonna go cry
Yeah.
for the hope that I
No,
have for the world from you guys.
what I just want to say one other thing. I think we have to be really careful with celebrity, because celebrities are so much worshipped in our culture and our society, and some of them are it's just like there's some awful stuff happening, and so we really have to be able to, I think, react critically to it. And I say critically, I mean, we have to be able to give a kind of a rational judgment to it for our kids, so that they don't go thinking that celebrity is what you have to be like, because they're a great, as Jamey said, they're wonderful models of sports, figures who are incredible people. And then there's some really bad people that are great athletes. We know both of those exist. That's true with celebrityhood also. So I
Well,
think
it's also, Rabbi, to tie in, current events. You could be a good person and have a bad moment, as Will Smith, has shown us this week. I don't think a lot of people would look at him and say bad person. Had a bad moment, and maybe something that he would like to, have a redo on. I see it with athletes all the time. I don't necessarily think, like I said, that they're bad people if they make a mistake. They just happen to have a spotlight shine on them that it's just magnified in such a different way. And a lot of the good things that athletes do isn't necessarily brought up in conversation as much as it probably should be, because those aren't the things that make headlines. My kids are lucky because they have that, sort of perspective that's a little bit different. They also have, they call him Uncle Jesse, but my cousin Jesse is an actor, Jamey Eisenberg. He was, probably most famously in The Social Network, the Facebook movie. But, they get a chance to see, that side of, he's just a normal person that doesn't necessarily have to have a camera on him to do something differently. So you can sort of, I think, show your children, and this is not just children, show anybody that these are people that are playing a character. They're playing a role. They're doing their job as athletes. You should certainly look up to them in whatever capacity you want to, because they're in some cases an athlete's perspective, but performers as well. They're doing superhuman things. And you can want to be like them in some way, shape, or form. But if you have strong parents, strong role models, whether it's a rabbi, whether it's a father, Karl, you gave 3 examples, I think, that are, I'm sure, wonderful for hopefully a lot of households. Father, grandfather, uncle, all those things. I'm sure your probably kids now are looking at your brother and saying, that's a wonderful person as well. Karen, I'm sure you have, many wonderful role models as well. And, I would say anybody that's been through family time, Karen is a role model, certainly for me, and I'm sure a lot of the parents as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody you see on TV that could be a role model. You can have these conversations with your children and say, your coach is your role model, your rabbi is your role model, your teacher is your role model, and learn something from them, because I think that's something that's a valuable lesson. You can learn something from anybody that's standing in front of you, teaching you, talking to you, coaching you, all those things. So I hope the kids I coach, when they look back and I say, he taught me this, and not necessarily from a role model perspective, just from, I learned something, and I can carry that with me in some way, shape, or form.
You are my heroes. Thank you so much. I am so happy this was our final podcast of this season. And I hope these conversations continue, because being together and making these connections mean everything. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Shabbat shalom, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.